Hello everyone. Welcome. It is Friday, August 27th, 2021, and I'm outside today because I got tired of being inside. It's still humid. It's like 85 degrees, feels like 90 because the humidity, I don't know, feels like it's 95% or something. Here in the Atlanta, Georgia area, again, it is typically humid this time of year. It's still humid, I think, into probably late September, early October. But the winters here are amazing, as I had my first winter last year in the Atlanta area. But when you work out, which I do every day, I can't wait to wake up and start exercising because I got a lot of energy, like all the time. So today, actually, I had to switch things up this week. Normally, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays are my upper body, where I lift weights in my upper body, and then I still go for walks after that, and then normally go for walks in the evening. And had to switch things up. So today, I ended up doing my lower body. So I did my legs, did squats and extensions and curls and calf extensions, and then went for a run for about a mile, and then did a 3-mile walk and talk. Oftentimes I do have conversations with people while I'm walking, so I can kill two birds with one stone. And then I finished up with a 1-mile run, and so I got my sweat on, and then it's always good to, of course, take a shower and feel clean. So anyway, welcome to everybody. Welcome to Vicky on YouTube. Welcome to Tina Patrick on Facebook. Again, we're doing Facebook and YouTube at the same time. And I'm out at one of my favorite places in the Atlanta area with the log cabin behind me. I really enjoy this place because it's just very peaceful, and I can go for walks around here in the woods for about an hour before you get done with the hikes that they have here. So anyway, I love to be outside more than I do inside, so I couldn't, even though it was nice being in the air conditioning the last, 3 days. So alrighty, so my breakthrough tour 2021 I've got scheduled in a month. It's been nice. I'm going to take off here basically a month from doing corporate ministry so that I can recover from a pretty busy summer of doing ministry throughout the West and throughout the Midwest of the United States. So I will be focused on the South pretty much the next coming several months. So September 25th, I'll be in Greenville, South Carolina at the Faith Family Church. October 17th in Port Richey, Florida at the DTM Church. October 31st in Houston, Texas at the Cool Church. And then November 5th and 6th in Waco, Texas, Walking in Freedom. So where I'm at in this location, you may see behind me that it looks like the grass needs mown, and it does. So we're praying that the lawnmower guys don't come and mow the grass in the next 30 minutes like they did when I went to Decorah, Iowa. And I was just getting ready to start my live, and all of a sudden I see the truck pull up with the lawnmower guys, and I'm like, oh no. So we are praying that they do not mow the grass in the next 30 minutes so that I can speak on a topic that I don't think I've ever talked about. I've been doing this since 2017. So about 4 years doing my lives. And of course I focused a lot on deliverance, demonic spirits, what it looks like, how to get freed from all that, how to heal. But when it comes to resolving conflict, I don't think I've ever spoken about that. And so I wrote a blog yesterday, posted it. It's on my website, restoredtofreedom.com, also on Facebook, my personal and my Restored to Freedom page, and the Jezebel Ahab Leviathan support group. And I started out the blog stating a premise, and I don't know that I even have to read this from my blog, but I think I'm just going to walk through it. So here's the premise. When it comes to resolving conflict, if you are in a situation with another person who has not been healed of their soul wounds, who has not been delivered from their demons, you will normally, most likely, have a lot of conflict with that person. And so you've tried everything to resolve, and you really can't. And the truth of the matter is, you really can't with a person who is, controlling, manipulative, prideful, arrogant, you know, takes discussions and turns them around and around and around in circles, and doesn't admit the truth, and oftentimes confuses the truth with falseness, and they're twisted by the demonic spirits in their minds. So that's the reason why most people are going to have conflicts, is because they're not healed and they're not delivered. So that makes sense. So it's really impossible to try to resolve conflict with someone who refuses to admit that they have these issues. So the whole premise of trying to resolve conflict is you can do it with the person who is more healed, more delivered, or pursuing and desiring and wanting that, because then they will have the same interest that you do, wanting to resolve and wanting to keep the relationship intact and be healthy. But those that aren't in that position, which is majority of the people, of course, in the world, that aren't healed, aren't delivered, and the majority of the people in the church, then to try to resolve conflict with the person who is under the influence of demonic spirits is really impossible. It's fruitless. Because what they're going to do is they're going to demand their way in pretty much everything. They want you to do what they want, what their demonic spirits want. So it's very, very challenging to, of course, try to resolve issues with people who are very demanding, and basically you have to give in to them, in order to try to even have a semblance of getting along with them. And it's really impossible, because their demonic spirits are going to demand you do everything that they want. And then maybe they'll be a little bit nice to you. But trying to resolve, I've seen this in counseling sessions with counselors, with pastors, where one person who has a strong influence of demonic spirits, they will dominate the conversation in the counseling session. And they will try to portray themselves as a victim, and they will have some semblance of truth against the true victim, which is normally the person that personifies more of the Ahab spirit, and the person that's a master at twisting things and blaming and going on and on and on and on tends to struggle more with the spirit of Jezebel. That way they control the narrative in the counseling session. That's why a lot of counseling sessions, unfortunately, don't work unless you're with a person that's a trained deliverance person who can take each party and go back to the inner healing and deliverance of each person, because then at that point they can actually be honest and own their own things. So hello to Tammy Jones out in Oregon on Facebook. So I'll go ahead and I guess just read through my blog. It says, I will start by premising this blog by stating that if you are trying to resolve a conflict with a person who has not been healed of their soul wounds, delivered from their demons, then you will simply frustrate yourself, because the other party will usually not be able to rationally discuss much of anything, and cause the point of contention to not be addressed while they take you around in circles. They will often manifest into anger and accusatory tones and blame you for not agreeing with them. Thus, it is impossible to resolve conflict in a healthy way with anyone who is not healed from their past soul wounds and delivered from their demons, which is most all the people in the world and many in church. Sorry to have to make that disclaimer, but it is the truth. People who will largely hear demonic thoughts in their minds, which is most all people, will have personal agendas, selfish motives, and ungodly intentions of their hearts, and not play by the healthy rules. They have been used to escalating themselves in anger and talking on and on and on in order to wear people down to give them what they demand. Most people then that have interactions with them learn over time to simply keep themselves away from these toxic people as much as they can, so that they can try to stay in some type of peace. It is not easy when you are married to them. They are your parent or child, or if you have to report to them in a job. You simply do your best to negotiate with them, but usually you must walk on eggshells around them, which is never healthy, and give in to their unhealthy demands to try to have any semblance of peace. So that is why when you read whatever, any blogs or books on how to try to healthily resolve conflict, and I've seen this myself in Christian books that have been written on it, they never really deal with the people that have demonic spirits, saying you cannot reason with the person till they're healed and delivered from those demonic spirits, because they are set in their ways. You know, they may agree in a session to do what the counselor's suggesting, but then once they get in the car and start to drive home, their demons will manifest within them. They'll take an offense, they'll get angry, they'll go off on the person that's typically the true victim, and they'll go on, and they'll throw it out the window. So it's like a waste of money. It really is. And so that's why the Lord has been putting more emphasis on inner healing and deliverance, because then the person can be freed from those toxic demonic spirits and from the wounds from their past that cause them to trigger today on those they have current relationships with. So if you've been sexually molested, if you've been touched, if you've had a father or mother that wounded you deeply and you've not been healed yet, so that means you still have anger and bitterness for the things that they have done, you will have demonic spirits. They will torment you in your mind, and you will trigger and go off. You could go off on Jesus himself if Jesus were trying to have a relationship with you, because your demonic spirits will rise up against anyone, rebel against anything that is a godly person. So that's why you have relationships where you may have a person that's more godly, more closer to the Lord, that's married to someone that is very prideful. They may know the Bible inside and out, but they know how to twist the scriptures, and it'll justify their behavior in triggering and going off on their spouse. So you cannot reason with the demonic spirit. Jesus actually said that he didn't come for peace, he came for division. There's going to be 2 against 3 in a family. Father against son, mother against daughter. Same thing could be husband and wife. If one chooses to serve the Lord and chooses to get healed and delivered from their demons, and the other one doesn't, it's like mixing water and oil. It will not mix, and you'll have conflict. So the whole premise of this is, if you both, and again, it could be a husband and wife, could be people at work, could be people at school, whatever, if they have pursued healing and deliverance, and so therefore they're stronger spiritually, then you can deal with how should you handle a conflict. Then at that point, that person who might still trigger and might get upset at somebody, they can actually talk in a calm way and try to reason with their spouse or others and to come to an agreement. And that's where this is going to apply it. So, all right. So for those who are healthier or more spiritually mature in the Lord, with fruit of the Spirit as evidence, and that's the truth. You got to have fruit of the Spirit. So if you've got a lot of fruit of the flesh, where you're jealous, you're selfish, you're prideful, you're arrogant, then you're not going to have fruit of the Spirit. You can't have both. Now, I understand that you're in the process. If you're in the process of pursuing inner healing and deliverance, then you should be further along in whatever, a month, 2 months, 6 months after you discover. See, I have a lot of people that, like, for the first time, they start watching these videos. I've had a lot of people this whole year that are like, oh my gosh. And I had a couple actually last night, did a session with, from near Spokane, Washington, and they just discovered it, I don't know, something like 3 weeks after I left, the Spokane area. So there's a lot of times people are like, oh my gosh, you were just here. Or when are you coming back to our neck of the woods? And I was just there like the week before. So I'm like, well, probably not for a year, but we can still do sessions, of course, with people. But when people first get this message, I can take them through a personal session. I can hopefully deliver them of a good percentage of demonic spirits, but they may still have some soul wounds that need to be healed. So it may take them 6 months, it may take them a year. But those I know that have followed the ministry consistently, especially those husbands and wives who have consistently been honest with themselves, Lord, show me what I need healed from. Show me what I need delivered from. They don't have the pride anymore that they used to have. Pride will stop you from being healed and delivered. Pride will put everything, and I'll say this, when you do get wounded and hurt, you will, and most people with the pride, will look at themselves as everything that they do is good or right, and anyone that comes against them is wrong. That's what the demonic spirits want to convince them. You get that. Everyone gets that. You want to think that the way that you live your life is in alignment with the Lord. But there's a lot of people that are Pharisees, modern day Pharisees and scribes in the church, that are very prideful, very arrogant, that have hurt their own children over and over and over again. The children want nothing to do with them. And then the parents want to blame everything on the child. Well, my child's a screw up. My child's a mess. They're just so disrespectful to me. Well, they were hurt and wounded, a lot of them, from their own parent. Could be that they were hurt by their father or by their mother. Normally, it's going to be one or the other that will hurt them more. And then that parent's not going to want to admit it. So until they get to the point where they can admit the truth, humble themselves, own the issues that they have, instead of blaming, it's so much easier to blame everything on somebody else and not look in the mirror at ourselves. So when people are willing to pursue inner healing and deliverance, and they have a conflict still, then you can resolve it in a calm, loving way, not an angry, bitter way, not a tone way, not a escalating things, not a, there's a myriad of ways that people oftentimes deal with conflict. They could be vociferous, angry and bitter, or they could be silent, not say a word. I know there was a lady the other day that shared a testimony, and she went 1.5 years without speaking to her husband within the same home. That's pretty darn extreme. I mean, that shows you the fortitude of individuals, and oftentimes it comes into the pride that would stop them from wanting to admit that they have their own issues. So you can get quiet, not say a word, and that might be how you were taught when you're growing up, that, okay, you can't say a word, be quiet. And then you come into a marriage that you have with someone that's unhealthy, and or you may have parents that are unhealthy that, they go off on you if you try to come against and speak the truth into them, so then you end up having to become quiet. So, or you get married to somebody that goes off on you, and so you just don't know what to do, because you're like, well, gee, I can't resolve this by talking to them, because all they do is escalate and get angry, so I might as well just get quiet and move on. So what's a healthy way of resolving conflict? Assuming that both people are a little more healthy and whole in their spiritual lives. So let's say that they've been pursuing inner healing and deliverance for, could be 6 months or a year. And then something comes up that triggers and causes one person to want to do something and the other person doesn't want to. Or it doesn't mean that, a conflict that either person is wrong. It can, or it could be that one person wants to do something, the other person wants to do something else, and it might be more beneficial to do plan B than plan A. And if that person is healthy and whole and healed, they may say, yeah, sure, I'll sacrifice. Well, go ahead and do what you want to do this time, honey. No big deal. Those are spiritually mature Christians. So let's say that, how should you deal with something when you disagree on maybe how something was handled, how something was done, and you're ready to both talk about it? Should you talk about it at night, right before you go to bed? No, absolutely not. That's what the enemy wants you to do. Oftentimes one person is way more tired than the other. So the demonic spirits and the person that's, wanting to have that discussion normally can wear you out and go on and on and on for hours, and you're just exhausted. And then you say things you don't even mean. You're not in your right mind, basically. All right, so here we go. First thing that I would do when you do have a disagreement is come together, and we're talking about husbands and wives here in this case. And you could do the same thing, I guess, with people that you're not married to. But I'm talking focused more, of course, on trying to help save marriages from striving and arguing. But you pray together initially before you start the discussion to resolve the conflict, to allow the Holy Spirit to lead the discussion, to resolve and recognize that the enemy, the true enemy, the demonic spirits, is the real enemy, are the real enemy in a relationship and not each other. Satan wants you to look at each other as the enemy, and you need to understand that. Now again, I understand and get it. If you have a person that's got a very strong personality, type A, Jezebel, they will oftentimes have triggered a whole bunch of times on a person, and it makes that person tired of it after it's gone on for, could be 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 18 years, 20 years, and you just get tired of it. So I understand that. But start out with prayer. You know, if you have your prayer language, pray in tongues. You know, I have my prayer language. It's interesting. When you pray in tongues, the enemy will fight that. Enemy does not want you to pray in tongues. You know, if you are in a disagreement with your spouse, from both sides, let's say that maybe you're in the complete right and your spouse is in complete wrong. The enemy oftentimes does not want you to pray in tongues if you are right, because what that does is it humbles you. And of course, the person that believes that they're right oftentimes has more pride. It's very, very hard for them to pray in tongues. But I would suggest praying in tongues. It's a good thing. So pray in tongues before you start that discussion. Then, when you begin, talk calmly in love without any tones or escalating voices or accusatory statements. Talk in a calm voice. Keep your blood pressure low. And then when you start to discuss the topic of disagreement, agree that each person is going to have a chance to share from their own perspective why they feel like they do. You know, your own feelings about something, you should be able to allow the other person to share how they feel. And don't interrupt the other person. You know, when the first person goes, say, this is how I feel. I feel like we should go to this restaurant to eat because the last 3 or 2, whatever, you've chosen, and this time I'd like to have my own choice. And maybe it's some food that your spouse doesn't really love because you don't want to pick anything that they hate or that they're allergic to, or they end up gaining 50 pounds by eating. So, but as long as that person doesn't have any, you know, you say, this is why I would like to. Or maybe it's, I would like to go to this conference, and your spouse wants to do something else that weekend. And just say, hey, this is why I want to do that. I think it would be of value for us, you know, as a couple. And maybe that it's more of value to the person that's stating it, obviously, than the other person. But do not discount if you're hearing them speak their heart from that. Don't interrupt. Listen to what they say. Wait till they're done. Acknowledge them. You know, that's a good thing. When you say, I hear what you said. Yeah, I hear what you said. So they know that you value them. Then, when the other person speaks, then the first person needs to be quiet. And let the other person say, well, this is why I believe we should, I don't know, do this instead of going to the conference or eat at this restaurant. And hear them out. Because what will happen is if you're calm and the other person knows you truly are listening to them and care about them, they will know that, this person really does care for me. And they're not just trying to be selfish. They're trying to listen. It's so good. The person knows that you care about them. And you can say statements like, I feel we should do this. I feel, or if we do this, it makes me feel this way. Versus anything that's accusatory to the other person. You know, keep things factual. Always speak in love towards each other. If one person misremembers, and I'll say this, because this happens, I don't know, more often than not, is if you're having a discussion with the person, maybe it's about what happened the day before. Things didn't go well. It escalated into an argument. And you'll see this with people who struggle with what we call the Leviathan spirit. It's pride. It's in Job 41. That spirit will tend to cause a person to misremember the details or the facts of what literally happened. It could be the day before. That's why it's also important to try to resolve the conflict fairly quickly and not let time go on. Because if you let time go on, a lot of the facts can be forgotten, you know, the closer you can talk about it. But I'll say this, is people that struggle with demonic spirits, spirit of Leviathan, they will misremember, they will misrepresent and not own what they've done or what they've said. They'll try to blame and change the narrative of it. And that could be really, really challenging when you're trying to have a discussion with someone, try to resolve something, and they're misremembering completely what they said, what their part was, and what the truth was. So understand that. But you try to speak, in the facts and say, this is what was said yesterday. Do you remember that? Get them, the other person, to say yes, and own it. Um, Again, if the person's not healed of their wounds and delivered, then oftentimes those demonic spirits will interrupt and stop. Wow, those were two birds that just flew like 6 feet away from my head. Glad they didn't hit the camera and my iPad. So, all right, so try to get to the facts. Just the facts. Just the facts, ma'am. Who was that? Was that Columbo? Columbo wanted to know just the facts. Just tell me the facts. That's all. So, all right, next. If a person's, say you're starting to talk to the person that you're having the disagreement with, and again, people that are not healed, not delivered, they'll take an offense at the drop of a hat, and they will try to offend you all day long. So understand that. Again, it's really impossible to try to resolve conflict with people until they're healed and delivered, which is a process. So again, most of the people in the world, it's going to be very hard to resolve conflict with, because those that have the strongest demonic spirits will yell the loudest, will demand the most, and they won't tolerate until you give in and give them what they want. And that's not healthy. All right, so a person starts to take an offense, and they start to literally feel themselves. You think about your soul. Soul is your mind, your will, your emotions. So within your emotions, if someone starts to discuss something that they're touching a nerve, and it may be the complete truth of what they're saying to you. And since you're not healed yet completely of your past wounds, you're going to trigger and get mad and get angry. How dare you remind me of what I said that was really bad yesterday? Well, what do you do in that case? If a person becomes, you're noticing that they're becoming uncomfortable about the discussion, then it's often best to put that issue, that discussion, on the shelf. Because at that point in time, it's not going to probably go well, because they're going to trigger. They're getting ready to be like a volcano and explode on you. And I know it's not fun for the person that's trying to resolve the conflict and discuss the facts and the truth, but you have to read the person's body language as well and see their emotions and take that into account. So do not talk about the conflict also right before you go to sleep, because the enemy often will cause one person to provoke the other in order to ruin both of your sleep. How many times do people argue and strive and fight, and then they end up sleeping in separate rooms? And then they both feel, they should feel sad, saying, my gosh, I don't want to do this. So don't oftentimes discuss during, right before you go to bed. The demonic spirits in a person will want that to happen. Hey, let's talk about this right before we go to bed. And you're like, oh my gosh, no, that would not be good, because I'm pretty sure one of us is going to get mad and angry at each other. So, all right. So if you cannot come to a mutual agreement on the conflict, you both may need to decide to simply disagree while keeping your relationship intact. Also, both parties, I'll say this, this is very good. If you can't agree, and it could be that one of the parties is being influenced by the enemy, they don't want to admit the complete truth yet, is pray. Pray for the other person that the Holy Spirit and the Lord will show them the truth of what they've done, how they've overreacted. And I have seen this work in couples where that other person, when the one person that is saying the truth and the other person really just can't handle it, when the one person prays for the other person has the Holy Spirit or the Lord show them the truth. And then they come back around and they tell the person, I'm so sorry The Lord spoke to me last night or this morning and corrected me, and I was wrong. Will you please forgive me? Oh my gosh. Guess what? Conflict over now. Come back together, hug each other, kiss each other, love each other. So, and again, now I understand if a person's got a lot of demonic spirits, it normally doesn't work because their demonic spirits are so loud in them. And a lot of these people can be, again, in the church, could be considering themselves a prophet, prophetic, and so forth. And it's true. And it's really hard at that point because the pride is so strong in them that they won't want to admit that they could have, made a mistake. So, all right, understand that the enemy is usually behind most flare-ups, triggering disagreements and conflict. And when you are able to look at each other in a loving way, truly wanting to resolve and willing to sacrifice your wants or desires for the betterment of the relationship, then you can stay calm and then love one another. If you are not able to come to an agreement and the conflict is escalating and it's causing you to not be able to talk, and I'll say this, there are some people in relationships that the relationship that you have with them should not have, because if they choose to keep their demonic spirits filled full of pride and you in a relationship with them, you're going to get hurt. They're not going to be treating you nicely. They can't until they pursued inner healing and deliverance. So that's the truth. But if you're not able to come to agreement and you both want to resolve it, then pursue a wise third party, ideally who understands spiritual warfare and deliverance. That's why I enjoy doing couples personal sessions with people, because I start off the session, I just did this last night with a couple, and address both of them, explain what I'm going to do, and taking each individual through getting their wounds healed from their past and delivered. And then once I've done, and it's funny, I'd say 95% of the time the wife goes first in the session, and then the husband goes second. But at the end, I bring them back together, and both of them are much better, in a better space. They're more healed, delivered, and look at each other more loving. Oftentimes I have them hold hands, look at each other, and say, will you please forgive me for all that I've done to hurt you? I'm sorry. And then the person says, I forgive you, and then vice versa. And sometimes I have them kiss and hug. But I tell them, I said, listen, you need to be slow to speak, slow to anger. The enemy wants you to fly off the handle and trigger. So when you disagree with something, be calm, be quiet, think before you speak. Too many people speak, hurt people, and then oftentimes the damage is then already done. And then they can't get along with each other the rest of the day because they remember those words that were spoken out of provocation in large part. So, all right, so inner healing and deliverance is the #1 method of helping people to reduce their conflicts on a daily basis. Choosing to forgive the people in our past who hurt us, repenting for our pride and sin, commanding the demonic spirits to be gone from our soul, changes people to being more Christ-like and having the true fruit of the Spirit. So ultimately, that is the truth. If we can pursue inner healing and deliverance, we're going to be much more calm, able to talk through things and resolve. But if you will not be honest in owning your own issues, then no one can get you delivered from that. The Lord's waiting for us to hear Him speak to us. I love it, when I hear a person that says, you know what? Yeah, I thought I was right on this specific issue. What I was having strife with my spouse was. But then the Lord spoke to me and corrected me the next day. And then I apologized to my spouse, and we were back together again. So it's very healthy. But don't let it go on and on for days. Deal with it. Typically, once the discussion becomes, an argument, say, hey, let's table this. Let's talk about it, maybe in a couple of hours, or at least hopefully within 24 hours. Because the enemy's goal is to get you guys not to talk, to not like each other, and then the enemy's going to start spinning things in your mind. and start saying, yeah, you know what? Your spouse is just so stubborn. Yeah, you're right, yeah. And then it causes you to develop anger and bitterness towards them, towards the person you're supposed to love and to trust. So hopefully that all makes sense. I never talked about this subject before. Of all the subjects, you would have thought God would have had me speak about it before. But anyways, all right. I'm going to let you guys go. Looking forward to a great weekend. Yay, it's the weekend. The last weekend of August. And then next week comes September. So, alrighty, I will let you guys go. So, saying goodbye on